Quip, makers of the Quip electric toothbrush, make good habits simple with the new brush head, floss refill, and toothpaste delivered every 3 months. Sets start at $25. Get your first refill free at getquip.com/auto. That's getquip.com/auto.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today in the studio is assistant editor and fleet manager Zach Palmer. What's going on, man?
Oh, just winter in Michigan. It's actually sort of nice, though. I'm
40
not
degrees.
complaining. So good day.
It's not bad. Just let my dog out. She was enjoying the balmy weather a little bit. It's almost too warm for her.
Yeah.
She's got her winter coat going. She's a golden retriever. Joining us from Columbus, Ohio, consumer editor Jeremy Korzeniewski. How you doing, man?
Not bad. Weather's about the same here, and my dog is a tiny little Pomeranian, and it's definitely not too warm for her.
All right. On that note, we got a great show for you today. We're going to talk all SUVs for our news section. We've got Hummer appears to be coming back. Bronco, spy shots of that. We get a really good look at it. And then we're going to talk about the reveal of the new GMC Yukon and kind of maybe compare it to some of the Chevy SUVs that Zach actually saw last month. We'll do a quick CES recap from Zach, who was there. Last week we talked for probably 30 minutes. It was three guys who weren't even there. So I'd like to hear what it was like on the ground, some of the things like the Sony car, just how they were in real life. And then we'll talk about what we've been driving. I literally just drove the Mini Cooper. John Cooper Works. This is the Clubman. So it's like the minivan of minis, if you will. And, that's a good headline. Maybe it's not a good headline.
It made me laugh.
There you go. So I just drove that. I had a lot of fun with it. We'll do an update on our long-term Forester, and we will introduce our S60. This is the newest addition to our long-term fleet. Zach, you spent some time in it last weekend, I think.
Last weekend,
yep. It's the T8 version, right?
It is. It's the plug-in hybrid. So
really enjoyable.
Lots of power, pretty
really
efficient.
Fun.
Looks so good, but we will get more into that later.
Jeremy drove the Toyota Camry Hybrid Xle. Lastly, we will spend your money. So let's jump right into the news. The all SUV segment. This is what the people want. They want SUVs, apparently. And General Motors thinks that means bringing Hummer back is a good idea. So let's just start off real quick, lightning round, 10 seconds each. Good idea. Jeremy, we'll start with you. Yes or no?
Hummer, yeah, good idea. I don't think it was a bad. I think it was a bad idea to cancel it in the first place. But I'm over my 10 seconds. Zach,
your time is up.
Yeah, I think it's weird that it's going to be a GMC Hummer. That's going to throw me at first, but I think that everybody is still going to be pumped that you can buy something with a Hummer name on it. So good idea for sales.
Ditto. I'll say yes, but for me, it's kind of a close yes. I could also see the downside of bringing back a name that in some circles was quite tarnished, but I think the market wants it, and I think the looks definitely, if they do it perhaps the way people might think they want it, could be a success. Plus, it's a limited play. Okay, so that was over my 10 seconds. I had watched the Democratic debate last night, and I just was trying to debate. I don't know. It was a very quick round. So let's just kind of get a little bit more into this. Interesting story. It did come out Friday afternoon. It's always good to see news at 4 o'clock on a Friday. That's good times. The Wall Street Journal was, I believe, the first to report it. Then everybody picked it up. I think what we're seeing is just this proliferation of these rough and tough off-roaders. The Bronco, which we will talk about in a minute, the Gladiator, of course, the Wrangler. For years, we've actually heard rumblings that GMC might get into, that segment. I remember being at an auto show probably in, I want to say 2008, the Detroit Auto Show. They had a sort of like a Hummer-like concept, but it was actually branded to GMC. So this is not totally out of left field. And I think making it under the GMC brand is a natural and smart move for General Motors, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes it so that they don't have to, bring a whole brand back, bring a whole dealer network back of Hummers. It's, a cheaper way to bring back the Hummer name and get that heritage, play back into dealerships. You know, I think that this is going to be more centered at something like a Rivian R1T when that comes out. You know, it's going to be limited. It's going to be the Hummer name, so I bet it's going to be expensive. And you know, if it's Hummer, it has to be great off road. And those are pretty much everything that the Rivian R1T is billed to be. So yeah, I mean, GM didn't actually get the big investment with Rivian. That was Ford. This could be sort of their answer. You know, we didn't hook up with Rivian, so hey, now we're going to compete with them.
Jeremy, you mentioned that you thought they never should have killed Hummer in the first place. Why don't you expound on that?
Well, I mean, I thought it was kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the environmentalists hating on the brand, and you know, I understand. I was following it all, working for Autoblog at the time, so it all made sense while it was happening. But in reality, I mean, the vehicles that Hummer made, barring the military-style H1, the H2 and H3 were really no more or less efficient than any other big, huge, full-size V8-powered four-wheel drive SUV. You can look at things like the Toyota Land Cruiser that it gets 10, 13 miles per gallon, and no one's throwing a fit about it. So I think it was, like I said, a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. The fact that 10 years later, they are talking about bringing the brand back indicates that maybe there's a little bit of truth to that maybe they just needed a little bit of a rethink in the brand in the first place. We all have seen the massive success of Jeep. Jeep has kind of sort of propped Fiat Chrysler up in sales, Jeep and Ram, for years. And I just think maybe they needed to invest a little bit of money into the Hummer brand, and selling it in GMC dealerships, I think, also makes sense because they're out there already. They're asking for product. So yeah, I think just all around, if they come out with the right vehicle, I think they could potentially have a winner on their hands. The market is going in that direction anyway. Electrified is interesting, certainly very different from what Hummer has stood for in the past. But when it comes to a reboot, I mean, I guess why not? I don't think it's strictly necessary that all the Hummer vehicles would have to be electrified or anything else like that. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's a long and rambling way of saying I don't see it as a bad thing. Maybe like an odd way of getting to a good place, but in the end, probably a good thing.
I actually think the electrification is brilliant. I think having a rough and tough, Rivian / Bollinger type fighter in, this large SUV segment could really work. To me, it's just a bit of a curious move to use Hummer as the brand to do it, as opposed to bringing back like the GMC Jimmy or any other SUV name you could have slapped on this thing, or an entirely new nameplate. That being said, it's so crazy it might just work. It's almost like let's just say you were among the people who were protesting Hummer 10, 15 years ago. Well, what do you say now that this is an electric vehicle? It's almost like they're doing everything they can to generate as much publicity as they can, which I actually think is so crazy. It's brilliant. It's like, take this thing that was so critical and then turn it into a positive. And I think, if they had just said, hey, GMC is going to do an all electric SUV, GMC is going to sell it, we'd cover it. That's about it. It'd be interesting. And then it would, we'd forget about it. Now it's like the message is Hummer is coming back and it's electric. So I don't know. I think from just almost like a P.T. Barnum-esque move, I think it could be brilliant. And, Jeremy, like you, I was covering things for another publication at the time when they were sort of looking at selling Hummer to Chinese investors and then ultimately winding down the brand. And I remember when they were about to close it, there was sort of this undercurrent. I believe it was almost like maybe the board stepped in at the last second. I don't remember all the details. but I think it was almost like, hey, wait a minute. Maybe we don't want to sell that. We might want that down the road, even if it was not something they publicly said. And I think you're seeing, maybe somebody back then knew something or thought, before you turn out the lights on that, let's just be sure we keep it in the back of the garage, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, at this point,
so
they're probably...
go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh, I think they're probably happy that they didn't sell it to, a Chinese... They didn't offload it to a Chinese company. And we also have to remember the climate was a lot different. I don't mean to make it sound like I'm giving GM grief for canceling it way back then. They were in the middle of a purge. Their financials were in terrible shape. We all know about bailouts and everything that's happened. I'm not like trying to say that, revisionist history, that if they'd never gotten rid of it, things would be better off. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying, I think part of the fervor about the hate for the Hummer brand was misplaced. It was basically a heavy duty Tahoe, even the H2, which was the one that everybody was hating on, it's like a Tahoe or a Suburban, a heavy duty one, with, it's rugged, jacked up a little bit with big wheels and tires. I mean, people do that with their SUVs, as it is. And I'm a green leaner. I'm not going out and saying like, oh, who cares about environmentalism or miles per gallon. I just think, it was a little bit short-sighted in the first place, and bringing it back just doesn't strike me as a bad idea at all.
So I agree with, basically what you said there. I think one thing, like, to go back to what you said about revising history, at the time GM was in dire straits. They had too many brands. Whether, you could justify all of them now, 10 years later, is beside the point. In 2010, they simply couldn't support an SUV brand when, they were taking government funding, and the same government was also instituting stricter CAFE regulations. So, I mean, it was totally an untenable situation to even consider really keeping Hummer along with other brands that they were looking at selling and or closing. Saab, that was probably a good thing. GM got rid of them. Saturn, the list goes on. We could definitely go back into, the bailout and all that stuff and rehash it. But sort of just to piggyback on what you said, I mean, at the time, this was almost like low-hanging fruit. Like, what brand can we kill to, like, sort of make it look like we're streamlining? This was the first one to go in the mothballs. And I think it makes a lot of sense back then. And I think it could make a lot of sense now to bring it back. So speaking of a name that disappeared quite a while ago and is now on its way back, let's talk about the Bronco. Spy Shots yesterday, we got a really good look at the actual, what appears to be like a running mule with some actual like design pieces on it. It's sort of the boxy look that we were expecting. And then, so first of all, head over to the site. Story's still up there. We got the Spy Shots. And then we have a nice analysis by Alex Kirstein breaking down some of the suspension pieces and just what, we expect to see underneath. So give those a good read and be sure to check out the pictures. But this is about what we thought it would be. Kind of bounced off you there, Zach.
Yeah, no, I mean, the second that I saw these Spy Shots in our unbox, I was like, wow, they nailed it. You can't actually see the real design underneath all of the camouflage, but I think, just from a shape, size, like that whole looking at it from the top down, like this looks like the off-roader that the Bronco enthusiasts, the people in the Bronco forums, all the die-hard people that have wanted this nameplate to return for so long, this is what they wanted. And it's really great to finally see it, not in that Ranger, mule form with the weird chopped rear end and everything.
Weird thing is, I actually thought that looked kind of cool. Like, if you had said, hey, we're going to call this the EcoSport or the EcoSport, like, okay, yeah, but yeah. I digress.
Yeah, but no, like this looks like a legitimate Jeep Wrangler competitor, which, just like you were saying before, Jeep sales going crazy. Everybody loves those. So this could possibly sway some Jeep loyalists as well. I could totally see that happening here. This is promising for now. I'm sure that, the reveal is coming in spring. So within the next few months, I'm sure we'll see, this piece of camouflage removed, that piece, yada, yada. and we'll get closer to what the actual thing's going to look like. But I mean, even the 4-door here, I mean, it looks good. I mean, and they're supposed to make a 2-door. That's going to be even more slanted towards the off-road enthusiast. So, I mean, yeah, what Kirstein wrote in his analysis, it's fantastic. Everything that we can see on the truck now points towards it being a serious off-roader. Right now, Ford is definitely doing this correct, I think.
So Ford is pretty good at teasing information, and they do their own spy shots, if you will. I think we saw something, I forget which vehicle it was, but it was on, just saw some different Twitter feeds. They released their own spy shots of something, video testing the desert, the cold. I'm wondering if, not really wondering, I feel like this was just sort of part of the campaign. Okay, guys, let's get this one out there. We got to test it, but we know everybody's going to take pictures of it, so let's make sure it looks right.
Yeah, no, I could totally see that. And the camouflage that Ford has used for the baby Bronco and now this one are especially, eye-catching. They have, instead of the normal swirls and dots and everything, they have actual circles with outdoor activities on them, representing hey, you're going to go skiing with this.
So
you're going to go rock crawling with that.
But now that's 100% they meant for this to get caught.
Yeah. So
well done, Ford.
They have been doing that with the baby Bronco that's escape-based, and it looks like they basically just transferred the same camo over to the big Bronco, which is awesome. I mean, this is the coolest camouflage design that I've ever seen.
Brilliant marketing. If I were a PR guy, that's how I'd do it. I'll say this. I wrote a story, probably 2 years ago. I actually remember walking through this park by myself, and I was recording it, using, voice commands into my phone. And I was sort of at the time a little bit worried. I'm hey, don't make this an escape-based thing. Do the Bronco. We all want it to be, sort of not how the Blazer has turned out to be, just this, family crossover with the Blazer name on it. And I mean, to Ford's credit, they were always pretty clear. There was going to be a Bronco and a baby Bronco. So that column I wrote back in, probably 17, was sort of my way of trying to hold their feet to the fire and say, hey, do the real Bronco. And this looks like it's going to be the real Bronco. So I'm excited. You raised an interesting point, Zach, about, are Jeep Wrangler people going to really take a hard look at this? Because there's a part of me that, I mean, I really enjoy driving the Wrangler. I don't know about you guys. Mm-hmm. Well, I know about you, Jeremy, and I know about both you guys. You like driving Jeeps.
Definitely.
But, I mean, a new Bronco, I mean, that's going to be compelling. And if it looks right and it's got that feel to it, I mean, man, that could change my mind. That's for sure.
I mean, it looks like the roof is possibly going to be able to be taken off. The doors could come off too. Maybe the only thing that you can't take off is the windshield. You might not be able to put the windshield down, but that's still to be decided. It's going to be an experience very, very similar to the Wrangler to drive, I'll bet. And it won't have the Jeep logo on it, but it'll have something that, other off-road enthusiasts may like just as much, Bronco. So, yeah, I mean, I could totally see somebody that isn't dead set on a Jeep going over to Ford and being like, this is a brand new truck. It has this, and that the Wrangler doesn't have. They might like the styling of the new car better. I bet that this one has. We can already see some of the light signatures. It looks like it has some interesting modern touches to it, in addition to the old boxy styling. So it could be somewhat of a futurist's Wrangler almost, for some sort of a different buyer. But yeah. I mean, I think it's going to end up being intriguing to both kinds of people, really. Well said.
And I think for me, this is going to be like the hardcore JK, JL, Wrangler guys. They're not going to probably do it, but I feel like there is an untapped segment that maybe buys the Wrangler because there's literally nothing else. Mm-hmm. And they're the people who maybe look at a 4Runner, look at a Wrangler, maybe look at a Land Cruiser. They look at a whole different set of rough and tough off-road vehicles. They maybe get the Wrangler, or they end up with the 4Runner or a few other different things that are out there, but there's not many. The Gladiator, of course. You throw in the Bronco, it's suddenly that whole middle ground you open that up to. So, Jeremy, I got to bring you into this. We've both been ranting here for a bit. What do you think of this?
I'm going to take a wait and see attitude on it. There's still a lot of camo on this. I think the broad strokes of the Bronco look really good. I think they've done the right thing with the ground clearance, suspension, approach and departure angles, breakover. Assuming that we're right about the tops, I think it's high time for somebody to come out with a proper Wrangler competitor. And I'm happy to see that Ford is doing it. I'm happy to see that they're doing Bronco the right way. It looks to me more like the 60s, 70s, like the really old cool Broncos that everybody's in love with, more than it does the OJ style Broncos of the 90s. And I think that's totally the right way to go. I want to see the detailing. The little bits we've seen, leaks with headlights look cool. Patent information with tops and doors removing and all that. That all sounds great. That sounds like the right way to go. I just want to see the entire package completely put together, camo off. I want to see the specs. I think at this point, I don't want to get too ahead of it. Yeah, Greg, I think you're absolutely right that there's people out there that are buying Wranglers, not because they are Jeep people or absolutely love Jeep and are diehards. They're not the people who put the "it's a Jeep" thing you wouldn't understand tire covers on their cars, or they're buying Wranglers because there's no other option for what they're looking for. Something with like the 4-wheel drive that's like, okay, I'm either planning on going out into the elements and enjoying it, or I at least want to look like I'm going to. And the Bronco, if it is what we think it is, it's going to give those buyers a second option, which I think is awesome.
Well said. Well said. So let's move along to yet another SUV. SUVs, I just saw this number. I feel like they made up 60% of sales, according to the most recent sales numbers, like trucks, crossovers, SUVs, and then cars were something like 25 or 35. I'll have to dig that up. Maybe I can find that later in this podcast. But hey, we're doing 100% SUVs in the news section. We got our first look. I should note this was written by Byron Hurd, who actually wrote all three of these articles. He's our new associate editor. You can be sure you can find him on Twitter, all the other social platforms. But he actually was the author of all three of these. So he's been here about a month. Be sure to check out his work, and we'll have him on the show sometime soon. Anyways, the Yukon, it's new. It's funny. I was just trying to double check some things with the Tahoe and the Suburban. It's like the same thing. New interior, yep. Diesel, new suspension tuning. You didn't write this story, but you did write the Chevys. So let's switch the badges. What do you think of this, Zach?
It's pretty much exactly what we expected it to be. They have the regular Yukon versions. You have the Denali, but now they've added the AT4, which is very, very similar to the Suburban Tahoe Z71 package. So you have an off-road model in addition to your normal Yukons and Yukon XL. The biggest thing with these new GM full-size SUVs is the switch to the independent rear suspension. They've been pretty much like the only holdout here. Everybody has pretty much decided that that's the way, for maximum cargo, maximum legroom, space in the third row, and comfort. And up until the new Tahoe and Suburban, and now the Yukon, they haven't done it. But here it is, and on top of that, we get a trick new suspension with it. We have the next generation magnetic shocks and a new air suspension as well, which I actually got to go on a ride-along in a Tahoe with that suspension. We did a little comparison between that and an Expedition. And the Tahoe on GM Proving Grounds, I will say, the test was, definitely GM made. So, obviously.
So you tested GM versus Ford on GM's tuning proving grounds.
On GM's tuning proving grounds. So just want to put all those caveats out there first. But no, the Tahoe was definitely the more comfortable ride in the back seat. There was less head toss. There was less just being jostled around in general from that new suspension. So that's great. That's really cool because a lot of people will be enjoying that new suspension. One of the crazy stats that GM gave us there is that if you include GMC sales, they have 75% of the full-size SUV market.
That's
so
crazy.
That's Tahoe, Suburban, and GMC Yukon, and that's not including the luxury cars. But no, it's absolutely mind-boggling how many of these sell, especially when you look at the really good competition too.
Can you imagine just like what GMC or GM SUVs would be worth as like a stock? Because you got to believe just how much direct profit these are like golden pork chop, cash cow vehicles. They're like rolling gold bars for GM, and they redesign them once every 10 years. So it's just like after the first like year, 2 years, everything's paid for, and boom, it's like Scrooge McDuck in his money bin. It's just gold coins. So that's a good point. And I think, my takeaway on the Yukon is I think I like it a little bit better than the Chevy versions, just from the design, because underneath they're the same. It's kind of a different look, a little, I don't know. It's a little quirkier, maybe slightly blockier and more futuristic. The problem is when you start to get into Yukon territory, you actually start to get into like Cadillac Escalade territory. And that's where, you go back to the Chevys, and they're really the good value argument in this segment. Jeremy, how do you feel about these?
I'm like you. I prefer the GMC versions over the Chevy versions. I especially like the AT4, and I think Denali obviously is a brand unto itself. And GMC has done a great job with the Denali brand, marketing it properly. And, even if it's not your kind of thing, you can respect the job they've done with it and the success they've seen out of it. We didn't talk really about the Denali's interior, right? It's got a slightly different interior than the regular Yukon.
That's a good point. That was literally our headline in one of our stories too.
It's such a weird, quirky thing that they did that.
It's a funky looking interior too in the pictures. Like that's one I really got to see in person. It's very like big and blocky looking, whereas the like regular Yukon kind of has more of a long, low slung, almost, for a big, huge SUV, you don't want to use the term svelte, but kind of classier looking interior, as opposed to the blocky looking interior of the Denali, at least in pictures. So yeah, interesting choice that they're trying to differentiate it that way.
I think we're gonna have to see that one in person. As I'm looking at these two pictures, I kind of like the Denali, but man, there's a lot going on with that interior.
Yeah, I think that this is definitely in response to a lot of the criticism that the Silverado has received for its interior. Everybody's like, oh, great truck, great powertrain, but man, that interior, it's tough to spend that much money on it. And GM is like, hey, look, we made an entirely different interior for the super expensive Denali version of the truck. Here it is. What do you think of that now?
And I think that's a good move on their part because, what is the number one complaint when like us and other reviewers ding GM vehicles? It's not the chassis, it's not the power plants. We almost universally give them good marks for most of their, their offerings. It's always the interiors. So I think it's a good move. It's a bold play.
Yeah. When I look at it, the normal Yukon interior, it looks just like a Tahoe or Suburban. The actual design of it. You have the sort of floating tablet look when you're looking at it straight on, and it's pretty much just a carbon copy as far as the actual hard points. And then the Denali, they have an integrated infotainment system. The vents are now above the big screen instead of right below. They even changed up the shifter, where it's put right there. So it's just it is really shocking that they would go so far as to design an entirely different dash for a different trim. I honestly can't remember the last time that I've seen that in any vehicle.
It's tricky to do. That's a lot of engineering work. You've got I would assume they don't move too many hard points, but moving the shifter is a big deal. Right. So it's... Well,
there's a lot of difference. There's a lot of difference between Expedition and Navigator, which again are platform sharing vehicles, probably all the same hard points, but there is precedent for it for taking your more expensive vehicle and giving it a more premium feel, and even making kind of broad changes to it. So that also leads us to what's going to happen with Escalade. I mean, what are they going to do with that interior? Because we know that's coming too.
Well, I think we're going to hear about that in about 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
First week of
Something like
February.
that.
Yeah, no, they actually they put a teaser out. It's a 38-inch widescreen display. So it basically goes from the instrument cluster to the infotainment system. It's going to be like totally different than the Chevy and the GMC, both of them. So I'm really excited, to see them really ramp up the tech on that to try and compete with the unbelievable interior of the Navigator, because they absolutely need to do it.
Cool. Well, I think we'll leave it there. We should probably talk about the cars we are driving as opposed to just looking at. So that's cool. Oh, you know what? I almost forgot the CES recap. You were there, Zach.
Yes.
You were on the ground with one of our producers, Alex Malberg. Last week we went on about this. We were obsessed with the Sony car and all of just the different like data protection issues. Like, if you want to go back and listen to like 3 guys get kind of grumpy about the future and yell at clouds, me, John, and Alex Kirstein really kind of went on. But you were there. I'm actually curious, what was actually cool on the ground in Vegas?
So if we want to go cool by who was, what were the most crowded cars, the Sony car, number 1. I could hardly get close to that thing over the 3 days that I was there. And I cannot even count the number of times that I tried to get close to it. And then second most popular was the Mercedes Vision AVTR Avatar car. Both of those were the absolute hits of the show so far as automotive. If you want to take into account like, oh, this many people were standing by the stand, etc. But no, the Sony one, obviously you guys probably hit it pretty hard last week, but that was my car of the show as well. The fact that Sony, this company, they don't need to make a car. They absolutely don't need to do it. And not only that, but they don't need to make a car that is so finished and refined. And the biggest thing that stood out to me was like how little Sony America actually like knew about this car before it was actually launched.
Like any good concept car, right?
Yeah, like anything. I mean, this was just pretty much a skunkworks project done in Japan that not many people knew about at all. I mean, we had no indication that Sony was going to make this production ready of a car, even though they have no intentions of actually making it. But no, like that, just an utter shock. We had no idea, like, oh, the Sony press conference is going on. Oh, look, there's a car all of a sudden. So that, and then the Mercedes was, that was super weird to actually see in person. The center console has this little thing that it breathes. It basically moves up and down and responds to your touch. And like they talk about the emotions of the car. But not only that, it has the bionic flaps on the back which move. A very CES nature tech oriented type of thing. It gets everybody excited at a show like that. I mean, it's not something that we'll ever actually see on a car in production here. But if we were to live in an avatar world, that is the kind of vehicle that we'd see. I mean, it's neat, but it doesn't really change the game or move us forward in any, I guess, specific way so far as what we're going to be driving.
So any other just trends in general, cars or otherwise, like CES, it's phones, it's laptops, it's TVs.
Yeah.
Just what else was cool?
Yeah, so I walked around the show with our video producer, just looking at everything because in the middle of nowhere you'll find something automotive. But no, so we'll walk through the LG display. They have the 8K TVs. I don't know how long will it take until we see an 8K display in a car. You can watch your Netflix movie while you charge on a massive 8K display. But no, the fact that we have TVs that roll up now. They roll up into this little box. Then we have TVs that they sort of pretend as though they're paintings when they're not on as a TV. They have a nice wooden frame on them, and then you have this picture that looks like a watercolor or a painting from the 14 or 1500s. Just like really neat tech stuff that you see all over the place. I mean, phones are just getting bigger and bigger.
Do you want to get a new phone after going there?
I mean, yes, especially I want a phone with a new camera. If anybody's into photography, like, there are some really, really crazy stuff out there right now. There was the Huawei booth especially. They had phones with 4 cameras on them, which is even more than the latest iPhone. The latest iPhone has 3, so we're upping the number even more. But
Seems
no,
excessive, but okay.
And cameras on cars too. Weird sensors. Gentex had this interesting thing with Aston Martin there. They had basically it was a combination side view and rear view camera. So you have in your typical rear view camera, you have now a video feed directly out the back and a video feed from both the left and right mirrors. So you can just look up into the mirror and see what's in your blind spot to your left or right. And then there was a sun visor that pretty much is clear most of the time, but it's able to track your eyes in the sun, and then you can basically it functions as a sun visor without actually blocking your view, because it basically just shades out the area where the sun is right in front of your eyes, which is it's a neat concept. I don't know when we'll actually see it on a car. But the fact that, we're thinking of sun visor technology with screens and sensors and, just concepts that we can think about maybe 5-10 years down the road, maybe in an actual car once they actually perfect it. It's all pretty early days on it now, which is, that's CES. You bring the latest and the greatest tech out there. Maybe it's sort of finished. Maybe it needs a few years. That's kind of the way it goes. Like whenever you ask somebody like, oh, so when will we actually see this out there? It's normally a pretty vague answer. Like, oh, well, we're in discussions to sell this and this to this manufacturer, and we don't really have anything set. We can't say anything about it right now. That's kind of how it goes for a lot of those, like, sort of nebulous, maybe vaporware, maybe real one day tech. It's a maze of like what's real and what's not real.
Well said. That great job covering the show. I think we tallied up 38 pieces of content that we created. We had like you said, very cool video. So be sure to check all that out. Search for CES and Autoblog. You can find all of that right there. It was an interesting show this year. I think it was one of the bigger shows in recent memory as far as CES goes. Probably helped undoubtedly by the fact that the Detroit Auto Show was punted onto June, so we'll be able to talk about that in the summer. But let's move on to what we were driving in the last week. So I'll kick things off with the Mini Cooper Clubman John Cooper Works. I'll tease this one out. You're going to do a first drive on this car, right?
I am, yeah. It's really new. Like they changed a lot. They gave it a lot more power, a bunch of suspension changes. The car looks pretty promising. I'm excited to get behind the wheel.
So I'm going to hopefully not spoil your appetite, but I drove it, put a few miles on it actually the last night or so. Just literally got out of it like an hour ago. I ran an errand on lunch. That 301 horsepower, turbo 4-cylinder, 335 pound-feet of torque. That's really good. I'm impressed with it. It sounds... there's a lot of low-end power, and then it kind of, it builds up in a very satisfying way. It sounds pretty good, like you would expect for like a JCW. Little buzzy, but, like I said, you expect that. So that's really nice. I think it really gives the car plenty of energy. Chassis feels pretty good. I feel like maybe it's because it's a little bit of a larger Mini, if you will, than what you sort of like are accustomed to driving, because this is the Clubman. It just feels a little better sorted than like the coupe or the convertible or something. But I thought it was sporty, what I wanted it to be, but it was also not bad as far as like just driving. I purposely sought out a couple of like really curvy roads on my ride home. It's a nice road. It's kind of forested. There's some nice houses. And you could really just like enjoy the art of driving, to use that cliche. Steering's quite direct. The brakes are actually, I think, pretty solid. I've been driving a lot of just SUVs, crossovers, all sorts of things. And sometimes like the engagement on those things, you come to accept just this level of like lobotomized, just like whatever, steering and brakes. Then you drive a Mini and you're like, oh yeah, this is what steering and brakes feels like. Okay. So yeah, it was fun. It was like a real jolt of energy, midweek jolt of energy. This one's not cheap, $48,000. Ours is pretty loaded up. Again, it was a JCW. I think when you get into that territory, you got to kind of figure out, do you really want a Mini, or could you be happy with like a Hyundai, Veloster N, or maybe load up a Golf R, or load up a Mazda 3. There's all sorts of things in that segment that different Civics is what I wrote down as well, that you could sort of bounce this off of. I think Mini does give you that almost premium play just because it's like, it's British, it's a brand that I don't think really neatly slots into any part of the American segment. So I think they sort of by default call themselves premium. And I think that works, especially when you get into JCW trim. Yeah, I liked it. This one, I should mention it had all 4 all-wheel drive. So, this is definitely your like close to the top of the food chain Mini, if you will, in terms of size, price, stuff you could get on it, power. But it still had that Mini, those familiar Mini dynamics. It was fun to drive. It did have an 8-speed automatic, which, again, that's a nice step forward for Mini, but I think I like Mini manuals. I think they're a lot of fun, regardless of which Mini, may be the one you want. But yeah, I mean, the swing out doors and back, there's a decent amount of room back there. You could probably get one big cooler. There's not a ton of room in this thing. I was able to get my kid's car seat in there fairly easily. The cabin is small enough that I didn't even do the driver's side or the middle seat. I put him all the way to the passenger side, pushed the passenger front seat forward, and gave him like his own sort of little living area, almost like a plane. So that worked out pretty well. I think it looks cool with those like halo headlights. It's a pretty nice interior. Again, for $48,000, you get a lot of nice trim pieces. All the gauges, it's almost like a motorcycle style layout. Everything's like right in front of you. Some of the gauges are like integrated within each other, so everything's right there. It had a nice head-up display too, which is good because with that Turbo 4, I was constantly speeding in this thing. It's really easy to get like 5-10 over without thinking about it. 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds. I would agree with that. I think it felt pretty quick. I don't know, I'll go with the cliche. It's segment busting. It's not an SUV, of course, or crossover, but it is kind of shaped like that. I don't know. I would call it just like a hatch is probably the best way to put it. Even though it's not a hatch, the doors swing open. That's my monologue. I know you haven't driven it yet, but it is a lot of fun. And, for me, the only downside is like, do you want to pay this much for this kind of car? For $48,000, you could get like a big SUV. Obviously you buy cars for reasons and purposes. For $48,000, you could buy so many different things. Part of me is like, is this what I would get? I don't know. Maybe if I lived in London or Quebec City or somewhere with a truly tight downtown area. I don't know. It is a lot of fun though. And it's fun on open roads. It's fun in tight areas. Visibility, forward visibility is good into the sides. Back visibility, because you are low and you're kind of hunkered down, it's not so good. Like you do have some pretty good blind spots. So I'd say almost as a city car, it is actually a little mediocre. I'm going to shut up. What do you guys think just about this in general?
So I think the fact that this has over 300 horsepower is like a huge step forward for Mini. Other than the new Mini GP, it is the most powerful Mini that money can buy. And I think that's a big deal. I mean, up until now, the JCW has had, just around 200, I think 228 horsepower was pretty much, the upper end of Minis, even the JCWs. So the fact that we've ramped horsepower up this high, that's huge. And getting under 5 seconds, 0 to 60, I mean, that makes it a legitimate, performance car. And it also has all-wheel drive, so you can drive it in winter, where you won't have any issues getting through snow traction. It has pretty good ground clearance for a Mini as well. I think that this is a car that appeals to very few people, most likely. But they're probably not going to make a lot of them either. It's a super niche car. for somebody that wants something weird, quirky, but also fun and fast. And honestly, there aren't, a whole lot of cars that have all of the intangibles that this thing does. I mean, when you're looking at, is it something that is all-wheel drive, has space in it, and is also quick, you run into the luxury segment really quickly. And when you run into that segment, it gets even more expensive than the $48,000. You're looking at something like an Edge ST or way bigger than that, an Explorer ST. So to get something that's small, all-weather capable, it has space for a kid, and it's also pretty weird and interesting to look at. You really don't have that many things at that point. You just have to be okay spending that huge $48,000 price point, which is a lot.
I think you just kind of wrote your story. All you need is some drive impressions. Yeah, there you go. Jeremy, I don't know if you've even driven a Mini lately. Thoughts?
It's been a little while. I did the launch of the current generation Mini several years ago when that came out. Actually, my wife used to own a Mini. I think it was a 2006. So it was one of the last years, maybe the last year of that first generation one with the supercharged engine, not the turbo. So I've got some history with Mini, and I've always enjoyed the brand, enjoyed driving their cars. Have not driven this latest John Cooper Works version. I'll tell you that the Mini that my wife bought, it was an S convertible with the sidewalk package, and it was something like $36,000. And way back when, I just remember choking on that window sticker. So hearing that the new ones are, what did you say, $48,000? Is that what you said?
$48,100. I was just looking it up.
That is just so much money. Here in America, we tend to think of things as, price per size, and that's not really the case when it comes to cars like this. But man, that sounds like a lot of money for a Mini. But I'm glad to hear you guys had a lot of fun driving it.
Cool. Let's move along to our long-term fleet. A couple things here. Why don't we just kick off with the S60 T8, which has rolled into our fleet last Thursday. Super psyched to get it. Zach, you took it last weekend.
I did, yes.
Just tell the listeners what we ordered and maybe what's in store for the next year.
Yeah, so we have ourselves a new long-term 2020 Volvo S60 T8. The official full name is T8e all-wheel drive, and it's the Inscription trim. So we had our choice between the Inscription or the R design. We decided to go with the more luxuriously appointed Inscription. With that, you get a few little trim pieces, and possibly most important, you get the crystal shift knob instead of the leather.
That's an orifice crystal shift knob, for those of you thinking at home.
An orifice crystal shift knob. Orifice, gotcha.
Yes. I believe it's either Irish or Scandinavian. I think it's Scandinavian.
Orifice. Got it. And who doesn't love a crystal shift knob? Can't say no to that one. But ours came out to a total $58,875. That is just a couple thousand actually over the base price. We didn't go for many options with it, but we got heated rear seats, heated steering wheel, and then the 19-inch wheels as well. So few things on it. It's white. Who doesn't love a white Volvo? It is really, really classy looking car. You walk out to it, you see those Thor hammer LED DRLs light up, and it's like, yes, this is how I want my daily driver Grand Tourer to look. And that's the sort of thing that we're going to be doing with it. We're going to be commuting with it. We're going to be taking it on road trips. And we're going to see, this is a performance-oriented Volvo sedan, and basically going to see how that holds up. If you want something that is, fast, luxurious, looks fantastic, has a very green powertrain, this is one of the big choices that I think you have to be looking into. Because it's a T8, it has the 2-liter 4-cylinder, supercharged and turbocharged, and that powers the front wheels. And then you have the electric motor out back, which pretty much combines to make 400 horsepower and 472 pound-feet of torque. So that's a lot of power for a sedan. It's actually even more powerful than our Stinger GT long-termer that we had not too long ago. And like Greg said, I had it over the weekend. You put your foot down in this thing and it goes. And it not only does it go, but it goes right away because of that electric torque down low. So, I mean, you stop on it, boom, electric torque right off the line. The supercharger is there. And then, it's almost like there's a slight lull in the like massive, like full on acceleration. And then the turbocharger kicks in and it's like, oh, there's a whole nother speed here that you get on top of that. So that combination of things, I think, is going to be really enjoyable. I know that I'm looking forward to spending a great deal of time with this thing. The fact that it's a plug-in, we can get about 20 miles with a full charge. I know that a lot of us will probably be commuting just on electricity most of the time. My commute is a little bit longer than most. I'm definitely going to have to use the gas motor to get back and forth. But for a lot of people, I'll bet that the 20 or so miles to get to work, plug in, and then get back home and plug in again, you could probably do a whole lot of your commuting in electric mode. So we're gonna see how well that works. Is the electric motor fun enough? Is it enough to get you on down the road and have a good commute, or do you have to dip into the gas engine a little bit more? What's the ultimate fuel economy that we get with this thing combined with electric and gas? Basically going to be seeing how it's like with a luxury plug-in. How green can you be while also having a ton of fun at it?
I will echo your comments. This thing is, spent one night in it, really fun to drive, really nice car, luxurious, looks great, really interesting and powerful powertrain. It's fast. Question we're going to want to try to answer as the year goes on is like, does this car really have a place, as far as just like, and I think it does, but it's like, where does this thing fit in the world versus like a comparable, say, crossover? Because I think, the sedan buyer right now is so nuanced, and sedans have essentially become just such a niche market that where does this amazing sedan fit? And if you look at like Audi and Mercedes and BMW, they're still doing great sedans. The question now is, can Volvo sort of like jump in with the S60, the redone S60, and, sort of continue to build on its momentum? Because I would argue for the last 5-6 years, they've rolled out some great products. And I think they have some momentum, but can they continue to sort of get in there and carve their own spot?
Yeah. I mean, and is a plug-in sedan the answer? I mean, there are not many plug-in sedans in this segment. I mean, this is pretty much the main choice until BMW comes at us with a plug-in 3 Series. So I think that this has a pretty niche spot right now for somebody. I mean, we don't have the HOV lanes or the special green access that you might get in California or Canada. Here in Michigan, everybody just drives the same highway. But I think that's definitely an important thing to take into account. When you're thinking of buying one of these, are you going to be able to cut 20 minutes off your commute because you get to be in a special lane because of your car's a plug-in, and the government subsidizes that, and they have a special lane. So those things exist here around the world. And is going plug-in worth it for that? We'll find out, I suppose.
This is probably the long-termer I am looking the most forward to in quite some time. It's different. It's interesting. I'm super psyched. But not to, not give enough attention to our other child, if you will, the Subaru Forester. We've both spent some time in that recently. Continues to soldier on. Very versatile, very nice SUV. Let's see, I spent the weekend in it, and I keep coming back to the, just basically the idea that this is like the right sized for sort of like a small family, but it's not like, I feel like if you had 2 kids, that's like one too many for the Forester. And I know I'm being probably overselling and you need a bigger car than you do, but like we ran around town, and my son in his car seat and our dog fit pretty well in there, and my wife, and all of our stuff in the back. And, this played out over the course of the fall too. We'd go tailgating, picnics, things like that. The four of us would get in there, and it was just a little bit tight. Like one big cooler kind of fills up the back. There's enough room for the kid, but then the dog gets a little squished. So I feel like, and again, this is like a hypothetical second child, you get add somebody else in there, it gets a little bit tight. That being said, feel free to contradictory. I'm sure families of 4 plus 1 dog do this all the time, and it's fine. But for me, and granted, we own a 3-row crossover, which we thought was, we needed that much space. I think we do, actually. I don't know. In some ways, this does feel a little small to me. And maybe that's just me being very American. This is a big country, and we need as much car as we can for our family. But, aside from that observation, it's great to drive. I mean, I got into it on Friday night, and I was going through, there were a bunch of cars randomly on Friday, including the Volvo, which I actually was going to take. I signed it out for Thursday and thought, nobody will take it for the weekend. Then you took it. I thought, he took the Volvo for the weekend. But I was like, no, he'll probably write the intro. He needs it. That's fine. So then I was like, do I want to take the Equinox? Nobody's taking that. And I thought, no, let's go with the Forester, just because it's such a pleasant, SUV to drive. It looks great in those Sparko gold wheels. Mm-hmm. The interior is fine. I will say this, having been through a number of crossovers in this segment lately, as is this time of year, it's like crossover season here. I think the interior is just okay. In some ways, I feel like we've almost oversold this Subaru renaissance of interiors. This is a good interior, but some of that trim, on the doors, I don't know. It's like this bezeled trim. I think that looks kind of cheap the more I look at it. Seats are pretty good. Infotainment's okay, I guess. I don't use EyeSight as much. Pretty much after our Tech of the Year testing for that, I just was like, no, this is we've tested it, we've tried it. It's not really my thing. But I'm never sick of the Forester. I would give it right now a B plus as far as just how it's doing in our long-term fleet. Very practical, very enjoyable to drive for its class. But you spent some time in it.
Yeah. No, you hit on a few of the points that I wanted to make with it. Like you mentioned, the gold Sparko wheels. We put gold Sparko wheels and Michelin X-Ice winter tires on it. They just happen to be sitting around Autoblog headquarters here.
That's just what we do. We have random tires and gold wheels sitting around the office.
Exactly. They were on a Subaru WRX long-termer from a few years ago. And
that was a fun car, let me tell you.
Yeah, lo and behold, they also fit the brand new Subaru Forester, the correct size. So why not put those on? And we did. We haven't hit any massive snowstorms yet, but we have had, an inch here, 2 inches there. So far, it's been spectacular. That's one of the reasons why people buy Subarus, why somebody wants something like a crossover or Forester, is to, navigate through these treacherous winters that we have. And winter tires on a Forester, definitely a great idea if you want to do that. And the gold wheels on a Subaru, hard to argue with as well. It's pretty much, it's transformed the way that thing looks. I think it looks a million times better with the gold wheels now. It wasn't a bad looking crossover before, but now it's like, yes.
It's quirky now. You don't see this anywhere.
Exactly. It makes me turn around after I park it in some random parking lot. I'm like, wow. I just look back at it and I'm like, yes, this is a good looking car. A blue Subaru with gold wheels. And then you also mentioned about the Subaru EyeSight, and just wanted to touch on the I guess lane keeping, lane centering assist in general. It's not the most comprehensive of systems that when you use it on the highway. I put a ton of miles on it now, and it reads the lines just fine. It sees them, but it's not one of the more advanced lane centering systems. It sort of just it's more of a ping pong you back and forth rather than keep you centered in that lane, which for some cars that's fine, but honestly I was expecting a little bit more from this system with where Subaru is at, and with how much they advertise it and market, their eyesight technology as being like one of the best driver assistance systems out there.
Totally agree. It's fine, but I totally expected more.
Yeah, there are plenty of systems from non-luxury makers that are just better. I mean, the Hyundai Kia lane centering system, that's definitely better than the Subarus. Hondas now in their newest cars, those lane centering systems are better than the Subarus. It's just they're better in the new Legacy and Outback, but in the Forester, which was updated a year before those cars, the tech just is not quite on pace. And I think, to your point about the interior as well, I think that the Legacy and Outback are the Subaru Interiors that I think are really killing it now. They actually look good. The Forester feels about one step behind those. It just doesn't, it doesn't have the big 12-inch screen. The center stack isn't as nice. There's a lot more just normal black plastics that they don't look as premium in there. The trim isn't as discombobulated. It's more of a cohesive experience. And that sort of translates over to the infotainment system as well, which, I mean, it hasn't changed the whole time. It's the same speed, works the same, but it's a somewhat lethargic use case. I mean, you click a button, wait, half a potato, and then it's like, here we go, we're going to the next screen. And I'm not a huge fan of like the actual touch technology on it as well. It's not like a normal phone screen where, like a tablet, where just like a small brush gives you what you want. It's more of a hard press, and then you get it. Which it's a small complaint, but it's something that other manufacturers have a more advanced system on there that's more intuitive, quicker, easier to use. And this just, when you spend enough time in a car, it starts to, sort of get on your nerves a little bit. It works. It hasn't been bugging out or anything like that. It's just, a usability thing that you see when you spend enough time. So
it's the sort of thing that in maybe like extreme winter and summer, when your hands are perhaps either sweaty or really cold, it's just, you don't quite have that like tactile like feel, and you're like, I found myself like stabbing at it just to change the radio stations, or worse, adjust the heat, which is just a big thing with me. I do not want to be messing around with the HVAC. Just, if I want it to be hot, I want it to be warm. It's 38 degrees, it's 28 degrees. I have other things to think about. So, but overall, we are really enjoying this thing for what it does. It, as we've both pointed out, there's some things that Subaru could certainly do better. Let's hit on what Jeremy's been driving. This has kind of got a green shade to it. This is the Camry Hybrid Xle.
Yeah, I actually drove this car a few weeks back, and I haven't talked about it on the podcast or really had a chance to write anything about it on the site. So I thought it'd be a good time now to bring that car up. A couple thoughts about it. One, aren't we all happy that there's finally a Toyota Camry that is like legit good car? Like the way that it drives, the way that it handles. I think it even, I don't think it's like beautiful or anything like that, but it even looks pretty good. It's kind of low slung and slinky now. It's so much more interesting now and better to drive than it has been in several generations. So kudos to Toyota on that, for not giving up on the sedan and the Camry line, and making it an interesting vehicle again. The one that I drove was a XLE hybrid, and I think we're all talking about electric cars and how they're like the next big thing. They're the current big thing, not the next big thing. And I think that's great, and I love the idea of electric cars. But let's not discount hybrids right now. Something like the Toyota Camry Hybrid, for a very reasonable price, can save families just a ton of money. You're getting over 40 miles per gallon on it, no matter how you drive. You don't have to worry about, there's no such thing as range anxiety in it because you fill it up with gas and, it sips that gas. And it doesn't feel like a penalty. It's not like super fast and torquey like a lot of the electric cars that you can buy right now, but it's perfectly fine in the daily driving kind of duties that people are likely to put it through. And compared to something like a Prius, which is weird and feels like a little bit of a compromise in daily life just because it's so strange and oddball. Something like a Camry Hybrid, for someone who, they haven't given up all joy of driving yet, but they want to save some gas and they don't want to break the bank doing it. I really think the Camry Hybrid's a pretty dang good car.
The last couple times I've driven a Camry and an Avalon for that matter, I've enjoyed driving them. They really are big sedans with a bit of gravitas, if you will. They're fun to drive. You can see well out of them. I think they look pretty good. That's definitely subjective, but I'd agree with you, Jeremy. I think it's obviously they sell a ton of these still. And, the hybrid is, I think, a really good play right now as we go just down the road to even more and more electrification.
Yeah, and a lot of people live in apartment buildings and don't have ready access to a quick charger. And if they're still kind of, as I refer to myself as a green leaner, that, a hybrid like this can do you a lot of good and save you a lot of gas.
Sounds good. So let's leave it there. Let's spend some money. What do you guys think?
Let's do it. This looks like a fun one.
So this is a good one. I almost need to do some stretches and warm up for it. This is really nice note. First of all, it comes from a longtime listener who is getting into our podcast, so we appreciate that. I'll do my best here. I'll kind of hit the high points, and then we can just debate on it. So this is a partially retired listener, regular listener of the podcast, basically looking to add to his fleet, looking for a used sports car for occasional and mostly local and infrequent highway driving. Back road handling and relatively fast acceleration are the prime factors here. Bad weather is somewhat important, but it doesn't really have to go in the snow. Top speed, not that important. Two-seater is fine. Willing to take a little bit of wear and tear for the age, so we'll call that patina, right? His wife's daily driver is a 2015 911 Targa 4S. That's awesome. It rarely leaves the garage, though. We don't want to bang it up, so basically he would call it a museum piece, okay? He'd like to get a 911, but he says he could be a little hard on a car and doesn't want to deal with basically maintaining two Porsches. I love this line. One 911 is enough. Okay. Limit here is $20,000 on the purchase, not including taxes and other things. Here's what he's looking at. 2007-ish Cayman or Boxster. Love the Cayman since it was introduced. Reminds him of what the 911 used to be. Hey, you and me both, man. I'm kind of with you there. Question is, do you really want the costs that come with another Porsche? I don't know. Also looking at an older BMW Z4. Or maybe he's asking if you should consider a Miata that won't break the bank down the road. Miata doesn't have the cachet of the Cayman, but it's probably the most efficient and effective choice. Anything else that he's leaving out? Maybe a used 550 SL. That's interesting from Mercedes. Or will that drive me crazy with $2,000 strut replacements? You should write for us, man. This is funny. This is so this comes to us again from Will. He is from suburban Philadelphia. That's a great spend my money. I'm out of breath. Jeremy, we'll start with you. What do you think?
His choices of the used Boxster and Cayman sound like good ideas. Miata, he's absolutely right, is going to provide a lot of the same fun and thrill of driving, and probably be a lot more economical of a purchase, both up front and for any maintenance wear items that he might have to consider. However, I like to have a little bit of fun with these spend my monies because it's not my money. And I identified a couple options. A Corvette seems like a perfectly acceptable option for someone like this. I did a little bit of internet sleuthing, and the 2008 and later C6s had the 6.2 liter V8, and that's a lot of car, and they come in for in that 20,000 ish budget. That's a lot of car for $20,000 and a heck of a lot of fun. So that I think would be a fun option, a good option. Notice he didn't include any American cars, so I'm not sure if that's a hang up. My other possible option was Honda S2000. Those are so much fun to drive.
That's really getting intense if you're going to go from like an SL 550 to S2000. But sorry to interrupt. Go on, Jeremy.
Oh no. I mean, that's what I'm saying. These are kind of oddball. Well, the Corvette's not oddball, but the S2000s and like you probably didn't consider this. But the one nice thing about an S2000 is I think there's reasonable chance that car is not going to keep depreciating all that much. Depending on how long you held on to it, it could even start appreciating. And I'm not giving buying advice based on that, but I do think that that's a distinct possibility and maybe something to think about. And that car's it's so much fun to drive. The way that the engine, that small 4-cylinder engine revs out, the super high RPM rev limit, a ton of fun. And I don't know if that really fits what you're looking for, but just something to consider. And those are the two additional selections that I came up with.
Nice. Broadening the field. Go ahead, Zach.
Well, Jeremy, you took my main suggestion with the S2000.
Well, make your case for it.
Yeah, no, I 100% second everything you said there, Jeremy. It looks like your wife has a Targa, so you like the convertible. Why not go for another convertible? They're a ton of fun. And it's also something different. You have a Porsche in the garage. I say pass on the other Porsches and get something high revving with a 4-cylinder. And to go even further into the S2000 realm, if you can afford it and you can find one, maybe go for a CR. Those are some of the rarest ones
Club
out there.
Racer, man. Those things were awesome.
Exactly. Get one in the blue, of course. And yeah, I mean, we want to talk about S2000s that are going to appreciate over time. That's definitely the one to get.
Can you find them for $20,000? Did you?
There aren't many for sale. I've seen them in the past listed for $20,000 around that price. I mean, it just changes with the amount of miles that you have on them. But you're just gonna have to wait for one to come up that's correct. But then I had one other dark horse. It's not as fast as the others, but it could potentially be as fast. A second-gen Toyota MR2. That's mid-engine, the turbocharged 4-cylinder. It's not going to be as quick as one of the Porsches or the S2000, but it's a car. It's from the 90s as well, so it's a little older. But I think, of all the cars that you said here, that's one of the most unique and, to me, one of the best looking choices that you can get out there. To buy the Toyota mid-engine, sports car. It seems like it's kind of what you want. You want something that's really good handling, that you drive every now and then. It'll have a good fuel economy. The reliability of the turbo, maybe it's somewhat questionable, but in the end, it's a Toyota, and it's probably going to be pretty reliable, and more so than the Porsches. And good ones of those will go for between like 15 to 20 if you get one with real low miles that looks fantastic as well, hasn't been beat on. So those are my two, I suppose, Japanese suggestions. Number one, though, is still the S2000 if you can find one.
The S2000 really resonates with me. I remember driving one like right when I first got into press cars. I remember driving a Club Racer. Oh man, that thing was like just so intense. It was so much fun. So that's cool. My choice would be, he mentioned the Cayman or the Boxster. I would say, what do you want? Do you want the looks? If you want the looks, go with I'd say the beautiful aesthetics of the Cayman. If you want a convertible, go with the Boxster. That'd be my choice. Since you're looking for like essentially kind of like a little bit of a toy car here, Yeah, the Porsches are going to be probably expensive to maintain, very candidly. But I really like driving the Cayman and the Boxster. I did a press launch a few years back. It was actually the GTS version, but just they really resonate with me. They're fun to drive. The steering, the chassis is so dialed in. I like the looks. So that would be my choice. I think you can't really go wrong with a Porsche. I realize you already have one, so you're being a little redundant, but maybe you might decide, hey, let's sell the Targa and get something else. So that would be my take. Like all the choices here. I also will say I have always enjoyed SLs too. I think they're big Grand Touring cars. They're a lot of room in them. 550, you're going to get a lot of motor there. So I wouldn't totally steer you from that. That's like the opposite end of the Miata or the S2000. You're going larger, more powerful German muscle car. And I think that could be a good thing too. So I would definitely skew German for my recommendations. And I guess we'll leave it there. This has been a good show, a long show. Thanks for writing, Will. We really enjoyed that Spend My Money. Everybody else, please send your Spend My Monies. It's one of our favorite things to do, spend other people's money. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Be safe out there. We'll see you next week.